Liftoff.
Okay, so we are doing section 2.2 today. And it's all based on the quadratic functions. What is a quadratic function? What's a quadratic function? What is it? It's an equation with x squared in it. The degree is 2. Okay, you're not going to see x cubed. You're not going to see x to the, you're going to see the highest power is x squared. We're going to review all the different techniques used to solve a quadratic equation. There's 4 techniques that you can use in this set of these in the homework today. There's 4. Now 2 of them you can't do on every kind of problem, but 2 of them you can do on every problem, and I'm going to actually add one more 5th way. You'll have to wait till I'm done. But the 2 easiest ones for you guys are simply factoring, like that one I just talked about, this one, the x squared minus 4. That's a simple factoring. You guys said 2 and negative 2, right? Okay, you could have also done, take the square root of both sides like you said. Okay, so you're right. The first set of problems you're going to practice is simply factoring. So let's take a look at the first type, which is example 1. Everyone look at example 1. It says 3x squared minus x equals 10. How would you solve this one? You want to get, wait, what do you want to get on the other side?
You want 10 on the other side.
You want a 0. You want a 0 on one side. So 3x squared minus x minus 10 equals 0. You want to try and get this factored the way you did in 9th grade. Okay, these are simply factorable. We call these ones guess and check. So in the parenthesis, what are your first 2 terms? What times what gives you 3x squared? 3x and 1x. Okay? Now, what are you going to put in the last 2 places right here? We want to think of what 2 numbers multiply to give you negative 10, but when I FOIL the outers and the inners, you get a negative 1. Are we going to put a 2 here and a 5 here? See if that one works. Does that work? So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 5 is 15x, and 2x, that's not going to give me a 1x. So what do I need to do? Switch what? Let's put the 5 here and the 2 here. Well, 3x times x is 3x squared. 3 times 2 is 6, and 5, okay. How can I get a negative 1? Where would I put a negative? Plus 5 and a minus 2. Bingo. Why? Because 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x, and 5 times x is 5x. These 2 give me my negative 1x, which is my middle term. You guys remember doing this?
Yep.
Okay, now, we have to remember the 0 product property that says if you have a product set equal to 0, either A is 0 or B is 0, or both. So, we're saying, we're going to pretend like this is our A value, this is our B value. What your job is, and you know this very well, you're going to set each of these little parentheses equal to 0 and solve them. Right? Remember this step? Then so this one you're going to subtract 5 and divide by 3. So it's negative 5/3, and this one you'd add 2. Now, if you were to graph this, you would see, I have a picture right here for you, the negative 5/3 is right there. That is where the graph would hit the x-axis, and at 2, right here. These are your 2 x-intercepts. So for questions 1 through 12 in your book, in the homework assignment for tonight, it's section 2.2, it's page 95. The BM, you know what BM stands for? Bare minimum. The bare minimum, I want you to do 1 through 73, EOO. You know what EOO stands for? Every other odd. So the bare minimum is 1 through 73, every other odd. If you know who you are. If you don't remember factoring, maybe do some more odd ones. Maybe do all the odds in that set. I'm gonna make this, the bare minimum is 1 through 73, every other odd. Everyone's gonna do that for me. But if you need more, you're gonna do the rest of the odds, or if you need even the evens, I'll be more than happy to provide the answers to the evens if you need them. So everybody's cool with simply factoring. You wanna make sure you get, here are all the problems that you'll see in section 1 through 12. So for some of them, you have to move a number over. Never factor without a 0 on one side. Okay? Flip this worksheet over, and we're gonna talk about the next type of solving equation. The technique is to take the square root of both sides. That's something else you've learned. So let's look at this one. This equation is best suited for take the square root of both sides. You use this one when the middle term is missing. You don't have an x to the first power. So what you're going to want to do in these problems is get the x squared by itself. So how can I get x squared by itself? Divide by 3. Now what do? Take the square root of both sides, and what is your answer? Square root of 3. But there's two answers, plus or minus. Here's a little note for you. Caution. When taking the square root of both sides of an equation, remember to write plus or minus on one side of the equation. So what if I gave you something like that one? What would you do? Add 1. So plus or minus, what would you say here? 2 root 3. Good job. Very good. Now this technique also applies to these kinds of questions also. You can take the square root of both sides on this one, but first what do you do with that 2? Divide both sides by 2. So you get x plus 4 squared equals what? 3. Good. Then what? Square root of both sides. So you get x plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 3. Then what? Subtract 4. Now this is just an irrational number. These are called exact numbers, and that's the answer. Questions? Okay, now back to the front page. So, well, what if we can't factor something? And what if we have a middle term and we can't take the square root of it? What do we do then? Well, you can complete the square, or you can use the quadratic formula, and there's another method, but I'm not going to tell you yet. Complete the square. How do you complete the square? We're on example 4. Yeah. I want to change this problem, cross this out. I'm going to have you do 2x squared minus 8x plus 10. That one. Do you recall how to complete the square? You do,
Yes.
Matt? What do you do first?
But you move the 8x and 10 to the side.
No.
Alright. Divide by 2?
Huh?
Divide by 2?
Yes, divide by 2. You want to get rid of the number in front of x squared. It has to be a 1. So step 1, sometimes you have to do this step, sometimes you don't. divide everything by 2. So x squared minus 4x plus 5 equals 0. Is this factorable?
No.
It is?
You have to do AC and then B,
5 times negative 1.
Can we factor this?
Yeah.
How?
I can
It's not factorable. It looks like it is, it's gonna, this one looks, because I'll show you, watch. If you put a 5 here and a 1 here, both of these either have to be plus or both have to be minus. You're not gonna get a negative 4. Even if I did, I'm sorry, I meant to make that a negative, make this a negative 1. You're gonna get the 5, but you're not gonna get a negative 4 here. So this is not factorable, it's just not. So we're gonna use the quadratic, not the quadratic, we're gonna complete the square. Now, I think, Matt, this is what you were talking about. You're gonna bring 5 to the other side. It becomes a negative 5. Okay? Yeah, you take half of this and you square it. What do you get? You're gonna add 4 to both sides. So you get x minus 2 squared equals negative 1. Now you take the square root of both sides. Now what are you gonna say? What are you gonna say? No solution. You can't have a negative under the square root, so there's no answer. There will be no solutions on this one. But let's do another one where there is, so you see what that looks like. So this one you would stop right there and say no solution. So what if I gave you x squared plus 6x minus, I'll do minus 10. Okay, so let's do this one. Do we have to divide by anything? No, don't have to. So I'm gonna bring negative 10 over to the other side. Make it a positive 10. You take half of 6, what's half of 6? And square it. You're gonna add 9 here, and you're gonna add 9 here. Now factor this. This is x plus 3 squared equals 19. Now do what? Square root of both sides. Plus or minus 19, root 19. And then subtract 3. That's your answer. So do you recall doing these problems? Okay, good. Now, what if I gave you an odd number here, and that's why I changed this one, if this were a 5, or a 7, or a 3, or even a 1, completing the square is yucky. It's gonna give you a fraction here, and then when you have to square it, you get another fraction, then you have to add a fraction with a number here, and it's just a big mess. So in those cases, I would suggest you revert to the quadratic formula. You can use this equation to solve any problem. You can actually complete the square with any problem. But some, I think, are best suited for, just depends on the problem. When there's an odd number in the middle for B, I would do the quadratic equation. If it's even, I like to complete the square. That's how I do it. Now, you guys remember this equation? Remember doing it? Negative B plus or minus. The common mistake that a lot of you guys do is you do that. I see this a lot. Negative B plus or minus, and then don't make this mistake. I see a lot of people put 2a under only this part. It's over the whole thing. So you gotta watch that. Okay? So that's your quadratic formula. And questions 29 to 40 are like these. We're gonna practice one right now. Make sure we can all do this. How do you solve this by using the quad, and we could have completed the square on this one, but we're gonna use quadratic. What should you first do to this problem before you,
Do the 8x.
get -8 in the middle over here? Now I need to know what's A, what's B, and what's C. A is gonna be the 1. B is gonna be the 8, and C is gonna be the 3, no exceptions. So now I always write the formula. I always write it. This is like my recipe. The more you write it, the quicker you'll memorize it. So now what I do now, my eyes can go in, steal this thing and stick it right in here. So I do -b plus or minus. I can square the b value. So 8 squared is 64 minus 4 times 1 times 3. All over 2 times 1, which is 2. So now we're going to slowly simplify this. What can you do to this problem? I would multiply these 3 together. You get 12. So you get -8 plus or minus 64 minus 12 over 2. Then I would subtract those two. -8 plus or minus 52 over 2. Can you simplify 52? I'm going to break 52 up. I'm going to make a little factor tree. 2 times 26 and 2 times 13. Is there any factor that can come out of 52 that we can pull out of the radical? This 2 right here. So this is -8 plus or minus 2 root 13 all over 2. And now, this is where you guys struggle, is simplifying this problem. How do you simplify it? 2 goes into -8 and 2 goes into 2. You have to do both. So the answer is -4 plus or minus root 13. The 2 has to go into both of them in order to cancel or reduce. So for example, if you saw this problem, see that? Can you reduce that? Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I know some of you are going to do this. But not unless you have something to cancel with here. You can't do that. Now what you could do is you could break it up. You could write 10 over 2 plus or minus root 3 over 2. And then you could say this is a 5. And then break it up that way. That's okay. But you can't cancel unless you can cancel both. All right. Next. In that one problem that we did where we got a square root of a -1, we said no solution. Do you know what this number 52 is called? It's called the discriminant. The discriminant is the b squared minus 4ac part of the quadratic formula. If that number comes out to be greater than 0 means a positive number. That just means a positive number. If it comes out positive, continue on, you're going to get 2 distinct answers. If it comes out to be 0, that means this is going to zero out right here, and you're going to have -8 over 2, which would be only one solution, -4. So if you get a 0 as the discriminant, there's only one solution. And if you get a number less than 0, which means negative, if you get a negative number, that means there's no solutions. So let's do example 6. How many solutions are there? What is the discriminant? How do you do this? You take the b squared minus 4ac, and we have to see what it is. Before we do that, we need to rearrange some things. You want to get a 0 on one side. So 2 is your a value, b is 1, and c is 3. So what do we have here? We have 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times 3. 1 squared is 1, and this is gonna give you negative minus 24. So what is your discriminant?
No solution.
It's, the discriminant's negative 23. It's negative 23. How many solutions are there? There's no solutions. So you will do questions 41 to 46 like that. Next, 2 more and we're done. See these problems, you're gonna see x to the 4th power. If this said 4x squared, pretend like it says 4x squared minus 13x plus 3. How would you simply factor this one? Well, I'm going to try a 4x and an x, and a 3 and a 1, negative, negative. Would that work? Yes. 4x times x is 4x squared. 4 times 3 is negative 12, minus 1 is negative 13. But, go to the original problem. How can we make this times this an x to the 4? The numbers are all there. The 4, the negative 13, and the 3 were. But we're missing x to the 4. How can we make these two, when we multiply them, be x to the 4?
Square.
Yep, and that's it. That's the ticket to doing those. So now what you're gonna do, you're not done. Now you're gonna treat these like miniature, take the square root of both sides problems. Like that. This one. So for this one, you're gonna add 1 and divide by 4. Square root of both sides, and you get x is plus or minus 1/2. The square, if you could take the square root of the numerator and the denominator, do that. And then this one right here, you're gonna add 3, and then root both sides, and x is plus or minus root 3. So there's 4 answers. And then one more. What would k have to be so that this has only one answer? In other words, my b squared minus 4ac has to be 0. That, when this is equal to 0, that means there's only one solution. When it's equal to 0, there's one solution. So we're going to do this problem. We're going to find the discriminant, but we're going to use k as our b value. And we're going to solve for k now. So we're going to use k is b, 1 is a, and c is 25. So in this problem, we're going to put a k for b. K is b, k is b, a is 1, and c is 25. So we've got k squared minus 4 times 1 times 25. Solve for k. What would you do? What's this right here?
100.
How would you solve it?
Add
Add 100,
2.
square root of both sides, what do you get? So plus or minus 10. So if k were 10 or negative 10, this problem would give you one solution. Okay, so what's your homework?
1 through 73.
Every other odd. And we have, I'm gonna give you guys